Well, UFC fans, UFC 303, we've got a very fun rematch at 205 between Alex Pereira and Jiří Procházka, and the Big D is ready to preview UFC 303. Before I bring in Billy, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. It could be baseball drafts, it could be baseball, football, UFC. Also, check out the Big D podcast for the audio listeners, Spotify and Apple. So, joining us, the only guy who thinks he could take down Bo Nickel and win a baseball draft in the same night. ActionNetwork FantasyLabs, Billy Ward. So, Billy, we don't have Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler, but I actually like this score better.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, McGregor is the spectacle, right? Like you get a certain kind of thing with McGregor where it's a big event. But in terms of just fight fans, I wanted this rematch anyway. I thought it was an early stoppage, the first fight between Jiří Procházka and Alex Pereira. And if you go back and watch that first round, Jiří P was winning. He's always kind of winning until he doesn't. But long story short, I'm more excited for this one. It matters more for the division. You know, there's a lot that can come out of this one depending on who wins. So, yeah, I'm with you. I prefer the version we're getting, although I get being disappointed that we don't get the Conor McGregor experience, whatever that may be at this point in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to that last fight at UFC 295 and MSG, right? 295, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting because Pereira started the fight really well, got some leg kicks, but then Jiří P got him in the clinch, took him down, and then really dominated the second half of the round. I mean, I don't know how the judges would have scored it, but I think Jiří P would have won the first round.
No, all three judges did have it for Jiří. They released those after the fight, even when there's a stoppage. So, yeah, it was up 10-9 unanimously. He was kind of confusing Pereira on the feet as well. If you look, there's some weird moments. He's just such a weird guy, right? Like, it takes a little bit to get used to that. You would imagine Pereira makes some adjustments and kind of has a better feel for his stand-up. The other thing I want to point out, though, I don't feel like enough people are talking about this. The rematch was the first fight back from a real bad shoulder injury for Procházka. He'd been out for a long time, hadn't been training much, ring rust, all that. Looked a lot better against Alexander Rakic. Of course, it's easier to look good against Alexander Rakic than Alex Pereira, especially in the striking. But still, you know, now he's got 2 fights under his belt, about a year's worth of regular intensity training, all that stuff. I think that matters. I also think it matters that Procházka was doing darkness retreats and fighting bears in the mountains or whatever he does in between fights. While Pereira had a couple broken toes, was doing some seminars, kind of touring Australia, having a good time. Of the two, I think Procházka's probably in a little bit better shape, a little bit more prepared for the fight. I don't know how much that matters for these guys since we're obviously expecting a knockout one way or the other at some point. But it's another factor worth considering, and it's why I bet Jiří early in the week. I got plus 142. Those numbers are gone. I wouldn't take that now, but, you know, he's the underdog for DFS purposes. I like that. Like his betting line. Yeah, he's came all the way back to plus 120. So I think the smart money has been on Jiří since he opened as a bigger underdog, which will make it an interesting dynamic for DFS.
Yeah, especially because generally when you have 2 dangerous men in the octagon, this fight's not going 25 minutes.
I mean, we say that a lot, and we think that, and we've been wrong before. I mean, not that it went the full 25, but we got real close with Jiří and Glover Teixeira when Jiří won the belt originally. So stranger things have happened, but yes, I mean, the obvious outcome here is that it stops sometime before the 5th round or before the judges get involved. Fight to go the distance is plus 350. So, you know, a little bit less than 1 in 4 chance or 1 in 5 chance that we get the judges involved.
Stylistically, how do you think these guys meet? Because Pereira's one of the most dangerous strikers. Jiří could be one of the UFC's craziest strikers, but he's also got a lot of ground pound. I mean, he submitted Glover Teixeira, and if you submit Glover Teixeira, you're doing something.
I mean, he submitted him by first punching him in the head many, many times, right? Like, he's not tapping Glover in a jiu-jitsu match. I'm just to clear the air on that. It's different. I mean, as a guy who converted from MMA to now training and competing in jiu-jitsu, a lot of these positions, it's like, man, if I could punch you a couple times, this submission would come a lot easier. But since I have to just kind of try to wrestle you, it's definitely harder. So not really super relevant. Yeah, in theory, he's got the grappling advantage. He's been an MMA fighter for a lot longer than Alex Pereira has. I don't know that that matters. I hope he mixes in some takedowns. Obviously, the main attraction here is the striking. He can be competitive in the striking. He's so weird. His hands are down. He's jumping around. It's such a high variance thing that he can both beat or lose to anybody in the striking. And there's a lot of fights where he's losing the striking until he finds a knockout. And conversely, he'll be winning until Pereira catches him, like we saw in the last fight. So the striking is real high variance. You would think the grappling is the straightforward route for Jiří, but it's not that easy to get Pereira down. Pereira is, in theory, a jiu-jitsu black belt. Those of us in the jiu-jitsu community have a lot of questions about how he earned that black belt, but it's not like he's just going to get mauled on the ground. He's at least solid down there. So it'll be a fun fight. I think it's kind of close wherever it goes, at least until it isn't, but that could be from either guy.
And then Pereira, we'll talk about his punches, but Pereira's leg kicks are ferocious. He really hurt Adesanya in both fights with the leg kicks and hurt Jiří in the first fight with leg kicks.
Yeah, and that's the concern for Jiří, and there was the concern against Rakic as well, and he ate a few there. He just doesn't – I don't want to say he's unable to defend those. He doesn't really try to defend leg kicks. He kind of just dances around and walks through stuff and takes what he's going to get. So, yeah, the lack of defense generally, but in leg kicks specifically for Jiří is always a concern, and why I wouldn't bet Jiří now at plus 120, where at plus 145 I loved him. And, to loop it back to DFS, I think it's a kind of a smaller card overall. 13, so not really. But there's not a card, I would say, where I have a lot of high confidence plays. So I'm definitely going to stack both these guys in cash games. 7,700 for Jiří. Not because I expect a 4 or 5 round war, but because I'm not super confident in who gets the win. And you're going to be real sad if you don't have the winner in your lineup and everybody else played both guys. So it's kind of a pretty clear stack, I think, for cash games. And then for GPPs, you got to play one of them, right? Somebody's probably getting a knockout here. Pereira's only 8,500, so even at his salary, any finish, he's probably in the optimal lineup. Jiří, any win at all, probably gets him there. Plus, he's got some takedown upside, as you alluded to.
The fight ended late in the second round. I'm looking at some of these props right now, and all under 1.5 rounds is plus 124, particularly with the short camps. Could there be a first-round stoppage? We saw what Pereira did against Jamel Hill. Now Jamel Hill was coming back from the torn Achilles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course there could, right? Like, these are two of the better strikers and knockout artists in the UFC at any weight class. Big guys in general, we expect more stoppages. They're probably going to mix it up at some point, or many points, I should say, probably more than 1 point. Of course, I don't love that line. I'm probably not going that way with the total. I expect it to get into the second round, so you're cutting it kind of close there. But yeah, an early stoppage, broadly speaking, first, second, maybe even beginning of the third round is certainly fairly likely. So that's one that for DFS in general, you want that in your lineup. You just want to make sure you get the winning guy because the floor on both guys is pretty low.
What's the prop for stoppage, knockout or submission?
What do you mean? Like in general for either guy? Knockout is minus 400. Everything else is fairly unlikely based on the line. So yeah, like everything about, you can look at this market any way you want. Everything is telling us that somebody's getting knocked out.
Do you think we'll see a different Jiří from the last fight? Because Rebic, I don't even really. Rebic doesn't feel like Alex Pereira. Nobody does, but
right. No, Jiří P is going to do what Jiří P does. It's different. I'm not saying it's the same style to the Dagestani guys, but like they're going to do their stuff no matter who they're fighting. We have a large enough sample size on Procházka to believe that to be the case, right? He's going to get in there and mix up. He'll try to take down Glover Teixeira every once in a while, and he will try to stand and bang with Alex Pereira and everything in between. He's just going to go out there and fight, right? He's not he's not where he is today, and his strength is not GSP style, super tailored game plan to the guy he's fighting. He's just gonna go in there and do the thing, right? Like that's what we get out of him. It's why we love him. It's why he's so much fun to watch. But you're getting a similar experience out of him, no matter who he's fighting, I think.
We know, in all likelihood, Makhachev's the best pound-for-pound MMA in the world. Is Alex Pereira the UFC's most dangerous striker?
Yeah, that feels pretty safe to say, especially knocking out Jamal Hill, because there was a case for Hill prior to his injury, right? The way he was piecing people up. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who else it would be. And the pound-for-pound thing's kind of stupid because, like, what if you were bigger? What if you were smaller? I don't know. Like, what if? So that's tricky, but yeah, I mean, he's an elite level kickboxer, came over to MMA and wins all of his fights by knockout. So pretty hard to argue against that. I don't know who I would, at any weight class, I don't know if there's anyone I'd pick against him in a kickboxing match. I think the obvious answer, I guess, would be like John Jones or Cyril Gane, just because of the size difference, but I still probably wouldn't pick him.
I mean, I feel like John Jones would try and take down Pereira if that happened, but
right, no, I was saying in a hypothetical kickboxing match or whatever, with no grappling involved at all. That might be the one case, or not the one case, but that was where, if we're looking at just strikers, that's how I look at it. And it's like, yeah, I don't know who I would pick over him.
Does the short camp negatively impact one guy over another, or both these guys just ready to rumble right now?
No, I said it earlier where I think it's not that the short camp necessarily, but from what we know about what was going on in Alex Pereira's life with the broken toes and the seminar tour and having a good time, compared to Jiří Procházka, who's just living in his hoot in the mountains and doing darkness retreats. And during these darkness retreats, I saw an interview with him. So no light for like 3 days. Everything's blacked out. He goes in there for like an hour, feels around to figure out where all the training equipment is, and he still like hits pads and wrestles, and he has guys come in there to work with him and stuff. Absolutely crazy. And he's doing that all the time, right? Whether he's got a camp or not. So that's part of my logic on being a little bit higher on Jiří here, is that I think just his lifestyle is kind of ready whenever, where Pereira was rightfully so enjoying some time off after his last win. And again, he came into the last fight with a broken toe and apparently broke another one during the fight, which I find very ironic because the reason McGregor is not fighting is because he broke his pinky toe. So they got a guy with 2 broken toes to replace him and put his belt on the line against a dangerous opponent who beat him for a round. That says what we need to know about these guys' motivations for sure. And possibly who the real biggest star in the UFC is right now, because there's a case that it's Pereira.
Didn't I'm trying to think. Didn't the John Jones fight? Who was the big guy from I think Ukraine or Russia with a broken toe in a big pay-per-view few years?
I don't remember specifically. He's had a lot of toe stuff. If you remember his comeback fight against Gane, as he was walking out, he had tape on his toes, and the commission made him cut it off, and it was a whole thing. They said it was like unapproved tape. So yeah, he's had constant issues with his feet, and guys that kick, that's going to happen. You know, Pereira, John Jones falling into that category. A little bit more surprising with McGregor because he's not. You don't think of him as a big kicker, right? He mostly throws hands, but you know it can happen to anyone. We've all got toe injuries doing this, even just grappling. So it can certainly happen. But yeah, McGregor doesn't want to fight that bad. Is the takeaway here?
John Jones, Alexander Gustafsson fight.
Yeah. I couldn't remember which one, but he's had a lot of struggles with it kind of throughout his career.
And then who do you think the winner of this fight gets? I mean, if it's Jiří,
depends on who it is.
Huh? Say it again.
Well, it depends on who it is, right? Because if Jiří wins, and they did this on short notice, and Pereira did everyone a favor, I think you kind of give him a rematch, right? You do a third one with a full camp, then we really settle it. That would feel the only fair thing to Pereira. And if I know Alex Pereira himself wouldn't ask for this, but if I was his management, which I think is just Glover, I would say, hey, we want like a rematch clause. Not that the UFC makes those official or puts it in writing like boxing, but like, we'll do this, but you got to tell us we get a rematch if it doesn't go our way, kind of thing. That would be my estimation. If Pereira wins, I think we need to do the Ankalaev fight. You know, he was super close to winning the light heavyweight title, then knocked out Johnny Walker. That took 2 fights because of the weirdness that is Johnny Walker, which is a different story. But yeah, I mean, Ankalaev probably got the call for this one and couldn't get to Vegas in time would be my guess, because he's the most deserving contender at light heavyweight right now. And if you're Pereira, you beat, hypothetically, you beat Jiří again, you beat Ankalaev. Hey, you're kind of done at 205. Who do we got left? Like, no one in the top 5 is even really on a winning streak other than Ankalaev. So, you know, does Khalil Roundtree get back? He was supposed to fight on this card. He feels like he's a fight or 2 away. Same thing with Carlos Olberg, also supposed to fight on this card. Feels like he's a win or 2 away. If you're Pereira after those 2, I think that's when you try to go up to heavyweight, which creates a whole other set of problems, because right now there's 2 heavyweight belts. John Jones doesn't seem like he's going to defend the real one against anyone other than Stipe, which is stupid. But yeah, you know, maybe he goes up and fights the winner of Aspinall Blades once we get to that point. I don't know.
Yeah, and then becomes the UFC first 3 division champion.
And again, I mean, there's no one at heavyweight that would be like a massive favorite over him right now. I don't think, at least. There's some guy, you know, I would certainly make Aspinall or Jones favorites. I think Jailton Almeida would actually be a really interesting heavyweight fight for him, just because we haven't seen a grappling first guy against Pereira. That would be a lot of fun. Or maybe Jailton can come back to 205 where he started. That would also be interesting. That's obviously, you know, pretty far in the future, and Poatan might not still be here that much into the future given his age. But yeah, I don't think there's a single heavyweight that you say definitely beats Pereira.
Well, to all the discussion about short camps, we got another short notice featherweight fight between Diego Lopes and Brian Ortega. And to be honest with you, I think this fight's got huge ramifications, especially for the winner of this one.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky one, because Ortega's probably not getting a featherweight title shot anytime soon, even with the win. Because, you know, you got to do Max Holloway against Topuria. Volkanovski probably gets a rematch against Topuria, given how long he had the featherweight title. There's a lot that needs to sort out at featherweight. Ortega has came out and said, after this fight, win or lose, he wants to go to 155. So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, Lopez, you know, Tapology currently has him as a top 10 featherweight. Young guy just getting started. He could be on, you know, a collision course to the top if Topuria clears out, you know, gets a win or 2 from Topuria, clears out Masvidal, maybe beats Volkanovski, whatever he needs to do, and Holloway. So that would be fun, you know, for Lopez. And Lopez is favored here slightly. I have no idea how the short notice nature of this one matters. Ortega kind of a bigger 45, so probably harder for him, but I'm not confident in that. And just going to be a wild fight. Like, Lopez rushes in. Both guys got good jiu-jitsu. Both guys can strike. Ortega's probably the more technical striker, but not the volume or the power or the output of Lopez. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't have a strong read on it. I am glad I am not doing the full fight preview at Action Network for this one. Dan Tom's handling that for us. So I'll be excited to read what he has to say, because this one could go a lot of directions.
Yeah, and I kind of want, and be honest with you, I wish this fight was 5 rounds, because I think it'd make it interesting. With this being just 3 rounds, you want to, I mean, short notice 3 rounds might make it better than short notice 5 rounds, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough ask to say, hey, you weren't planning on fighting at all, now we want you to do 5, especially for featherweights, because the pace is so much faster than the bigger guys doing 5. And with that said, you know, under 2.5 is a minus 140 favorite. Fight to end inside the distance is favored. Probably doesn't matter.
Yeah, how do you look at this from a DFS standpoint? I mean, this feels like a better GPP. This feels like a better GPP fight than cash game fight.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of interest for it in cash. Like, Ortega is typically not a guy, and I'm not looking at numbers right now, so I could be wrong. Typically not a guy that scores super well without picking up a quick finish, which makes him hard, especially against Diego Lopes, who's a very, very good jiu-jitsu black belt himself. He's the grappling coach at the camp in Mexico where Alexa Grasso, Irene Aldana, among others, train. So when you think like the path to obvious big scores for Ortega is a quick finish, usually via submission, that's not super clear here. So I don't love Ortega. Lopes is a little bit expensive for his likeliest outcome because he's not that big of a favorite. Probably have more Lopes in GPPs, but not really going with either guy in cash games.
Yeah, and funny or not, it seems like three of the top of the 4 fighters we mentioned fall on the same card.
Yeah, I mean, but it makes sense, right? Like if that's the timeline for the turnaround, and these are the guys who haven't fought in a little bit and aren't booked. Yeah.
And the UFC needs stars for a big pay-per-view.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. And Pereira's always down to step in and save the day. A lot of times these guys get a little bit of boost in their payouts too for doing it. So yeah, why not?
So then, after the light heavyweight title fight, the 145 fight, what other fights are you excited to see? Hopefully, none of them gets canceled like a few others we've seen. Because I mean, Jamel Hill was supposed to fight in this card. Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler supposed to fight each other. What fights are you excited to hopefully see?
Yeah, from like a betting and DFS standpoint, I can't believe Anthony Smith is an underdog here. He's fighting a middleweight, Roman Dolidze. Dolidze is an elite grappler. I think he's an ADCC winner, or at least like high placement at ADCC. But Anthony Smith is a real good grappler too. That's usually how he gets it done. And Dolidze has given up 20 pounds. He's not that big of a dude, even for middleweight. Smith is a former middleweight, so it's not like he's massive, but the knock on Smith is usually his durability. You know, he gets hit a lot. He kind of crumples a little bit. That's way less of a concern against a middleweight who's more of a grappler. So I really like Anthony Smith as an underdog bet. I really like Anthony Smith for DFS of all types. 7,800, kind of any win you figure gets it done for Anthony Smith, especially if he gets a takedown or two or just picks him apart at range. So that's fun. One I am excited to see but have like zero DFS interest in is Ian Gary versus Michael Page. Kind of a weird fight. Two long, accurate, technical strikers fighting each other. You know, usually Machado is, I'm going to call him Ian Gary. Machado, whatever. Ian Gary, usually the longer guy in his fights, but he's given up 5 inches and reached MVP. I don't love it for DFS because both guys are pretty low volume. They're snipers. They're not, you know, machine gun shooters. So unless they get a knockout, you're not going to get a big score out of them. Both guys have really good defense, so you probably don't expect a knockout. I'm just excited for the technical striking match here because it'll be an interesting fight. So that's a fun one to open the main card. I know Gary wanted to fight on a Conor McGregor card and doesn't get to do that now, but definitely excited for that one. Cub Swanson's always a good time. Probably going to have a rough go of it against Andre Fili, but he makes for some fun fights. And then Peyton Talbot, the Uber prospect, 8-0, has looked awesome in all of his fights. He is 9,800 on DraftKings, which really hard to pay that salary off. I don't think I'm going to have a ton of him. I love him for Rainmakers. I had an elite card. I pulled a couple rares in the packs. So excited about that. He's a tough DFS click because of his salary. You know, he could get a first round win and still not be in the optimal lineup, but he's like a minus 1,600 favorite or something. As high as minus 2,200 on FanDuel. So he's got a chance at closing as the heaviest favorite ever. Excited to see him do his thing. I think we know how it's going to go, so it's not like what's going to happen here fight, but it is a fun one. Just because he's a real high-level prospect. I want to see how high he can get.
Yeah, and I mean, at least the average fans have got somebody to cheer for. Might not be Conor McGregor.
Yeah, I think the idea here is that you transfer some of that star power from McGregor down to Gary because people are already watching. Got another Irish guy. Again, obviously didn't work out that way. Oh, one other one I should mention, also a prohibitive favorite, is Ray Tsuruya, the Japanese flyweight. Sean Zerillo said last week on our UFC podcast he thinks Tsuruya might be the better Japanese flyweight prospect, even considering Tatsuro Taira. And that's saying something because Taira is really, really good. So, again, prohibitive favorite. I like him better for DFS. He's going to wrestle more, and he's 500 cheaper than Peyton Talbot. So that's a fun one. I'm going to have more of him in DFS, probably less Rainmakers because the cards are expensive, and I didn't already buy a bunch. But, yeah, so that'll be a fun one too.
Yeah, actually, the Gary Page card would look pretty nice on the next pay-per-view in Manchester, right?
Yeah, I think they were thinking about doing it that way, but they made the decision between that and the McGregor effect and went with the McGregor effect that fell through. So I get why they did it the way they did. It could have worked either way, but yeah.
And then, aren't you competing in like some grappling tournament?
Yeah, I got one coming up, not this weekend, the weekend after. I'm not sure that anyone's going to be in my like weight class division, so I might end up just doing the absolute, which is all belts, all weights together. I'll be one of the bigger guys, purple belt, kind of middle of the belt level. So I got a shot. There's a 260-ish pound black belt already signed up for that, though. So scary, but he's also 58 years old. So it kind of evens out. It'll be tough. He's good, though. Like, I've seen him roll before. That'll be fun. But, you know, it worked out nicely that the tournament was coming to my town on a day with no UFC. So I can't ask for better than that. Going to get out there, support the team. My daughter might do the tournament as well. I'm still trying to talk her into it.
And wait, so this is a wrestling tournament?
Jiu-jitsu / no-gi grappling. So with submissions.
Okay, so no like boxing, but you can be choked out.
Right, yeah. Now basically an MMA fight without the hitting.
Okay.
I don't need at this point in my life, I'm just doing this for fun, not money. I don't need the brain trauma. I'll spar like 3-4 times a year just to stay sharp, but you know, what are we doing here? I'm a 34-year-old man with a white-collar job. I don't need to be getting hit in the head for no reason.
Unless you have a helmet on.
With that said, if any of your listeners, and they're not, so stick with me here. If any of your listeners are organizing a combat jiu-jitsu tournament where you can do the open hand slaps on the ground, call your boy. I want to do that so bad, but it's not something you can just sign up for. They're all like invitation only, so it's a whole thing.
Okay, Billy, we wish you luck in your grappling tournament, and hopefully UFC 303 is profitable for both of us.
Yeah, should be a fun one, and everyone check out my full DFS breakdown later this week because this is a tough one. I don't think there's like too many obvious plays or like a clear right build, so I like these kind of cards, but it definitely requires a little bit more thought and research than a lot of them.